Welcome to Six Steps to Change. I'm glad you're here. I am Dr. Colleen Lindsay, and through my own journey, I have figured out there are six things that absolutely need to be in place for change to become sustainable and lasting in your life. Because if you're anything like me, you've had this same problem. You've got this ability, this capability, and these amazing accomplishments, and yet we all struggle with trying to make changes that actually last in our life. And so we know that we should eat better, or we want to improve our relationships, or maybe we're trying to manage our stress or break a habit or perhaps build a habit. And we have this great motivation and we start strong, and then life happens and our best intentions kind of falter, and we end up being right back where we started, except now we feel worse. We believe we're a failure. We believe we can't do it. We don't have the willpower. We don't have the motivation. And we do this over and over and over again. And as adults, we end up creating these messages in our lives that say things like, I just can't, or I always start strong, but I falter, or I think that I'm broken, or the problem's with me, or that there's something wrong with my own willpower. And that's not true. You're not broken. You don't need to be fixed. You're attempting to do something the wrong way. We've been told over and over again that here are all of the different things that you need to do and be in order to be successful and amazing and marvelous. And very often it's suggested that we try and do all of it at one time and just restructure your entire life. And it really doesn't work that way. Our brain is not set up to work that way. And so if we can work with what we are given rather than trying to work against it, then our changes end up being sustainable and that lasting transformation actually occurs. So instead of trying and failing in the beginning to believe that you really can't change, that you really are going to be stuck forever this way, and you don't have that ability to follow through or whatever, we're going to dispel that lie and send it on its way and find a solution that actually works. And that's what we're going to do today. And that's why you're here, because I believe that there is a framework we can use that has six elements in it, and it will give us change that lasts. You won't feel stuck. I felt stuck. I felt hopeless. I weighed 150 pounds more than I do now, and I was stuck. And I mean that in a lot of senses of the word, because it wasn't just my weight that has changed. The decisions I make, the way in which I handle stress, the way in which I show up and take up space, not figurative, not literally, but figuratively now, right? All of that has transformed. So my promise to you is at the end of this, you'll have a very clear roadmap of what to do to make those changes sustainable in your life as well. Now, before we get any further, I want to be very clear with you. This is not a one and done. That just doesn't work. There's nowhere that anybody, I don't think, is going to say, yes, if you say this or do this or whatever, you'll never have to think on it again. It really typically does not work that way. But instead, we begin to adopt practices and systems that set us up for success. And it is paying attention, and it is adopting a new way of thinking and living that will do that. And so I do promise you the ability to make these changes, but it is understanding why they didn't stick the first time that will help you. So here's a couple of tools. First, I structured it around the word change. I'm an English teacher at heart, and so acronyms made sense to me. So we're going to look at the CHANGE of change to kind of give us an idea of what we need to pay attention to. These are not necessarily in the order in which it must be followed. Instead, it's in the order in which the word follows, right? But I do think that there are some that I think you and I both can understand come up before others. But we're going to go through the order that the word. So we're going to start with C. And I think that the first thing you need to be aware of and address needs to be your curiosity. In order for you to change your life, you first have to be curious about what's going on and who you are. And so there's some exploration there, figuring out what's really happening, what motivations, what patterns, what's triggering you, and what truly but drives your behavior. If you've never done a personality assessment of any sort or don't have a clear idea of where you stand on that, there's a lot out there. In fact, on my own website, I have a what kind of pasta are you? And you may be joking and laughing and thinking that's a ridiculous thing. It is, except at its core, it's a really good instrument for giving you feedback on those basic 5 core principles of who we are. And so if you've got nothing better, and then that's a great way to do it. It's free. It's awesome. But the entire idea behind understanding the personality inventory, your preferences, your tendencies, these give you insight as to why you do what you do, but also where you can make those changes most effectively. For instance, one instrument or one element that is in a lot of instruments is your level of extroversion versus introversion. Extroversion being those who are fueled by time with other people, introversion being those people who really do best if they have some time to themselves. If I'm an extrovert and I'm trying to make sustainable changes in my life involving other people, is often very helpful. Introverts may very well benefit from that as well. However, as an extrovert, typically trying to do it by myself in my own world and not having any kind of camaraderie or community or somebody to kind of walk through, talk through with, it sometimes doesn't work as well. So that's one element of why being curious and understanding who you are helps make a difference. Our second letter would be H. This is our habits. There are a bazillion different amazing experts out there that can give you all kinds of information about really effective ways to start and stop habits. Whether it's Gretchen Rubin or James Clear or Brian Keene or Stephen Guise, there's a lot of amazing authors that have given us some excellent blueprints on what does and does not work psychologically for us. But here's what I will tell you. There are some really cool things you can do with habits that will help change you. I have a good friend who decided to stop biting their nails. It's a rather innocuous thing, right? I mean, whether or not you do or don't. But here's what I found fascinating, because what they told me was every time they look down and see that they've not bitten their nails, it reminds them, I can change. I can do hard things. It is this very tangible, physical, there every day at the ends of their fingers evidence that there is change. So when they look at making other bigger, harder changes, there's this built-in encouragement right here every single day. And so sometimes having those habits and acknowledging them, yeah, I brush my teeth twice a day, every day. Woohoo, you're right. It seems like a no big deal. But again, you want to kind of say, wait a second, I really do. These are the habits I've chosen to do. Some from the time we were children, others I've adopted habits as an adult. And it's comforting and helpful to look back and get the positive reinforcement that I can make changes. And here's evidence to that. So, yes, we want to certainly look at and be curious about who we are, but also what habits do we already have in place and how do we want to work with those? The A stands for attitude. You'll hear this from a lot of experts. How we perceive our circumstances, that makes a huge difference. Our level of optimism, our level of gratitude, our positive mindset really does shape our reality. So saying, oh, it's Monday, it's going to be a horrible day, is probably not a great way to start the day, because more than likely you're going to have a challenging day because you're looking for it to be a challenging day. If you can approach Even the things in your life that you don't feel like are going like you would like for them to, the places where you'd like to see this change, if you can begin to appreciate and be grateful for the pieces of it that are going well, if you can find ways to look at it in a positive light, if you can reframe your circumstances and recognize where the positive pieces are, you will see a longer lasting peace. Because the more positive we approach it, the more apt we are to keep at it. And so instead of saying, oh, I have to work out every day, you say, I get to work out every day. I am physically capable of doing this. I am able to walk and move and stretch and grow. And that's a really cool thing. And looking at it and framing in that way does make a huge difference psychologically and in our approach to things. When we get to our next letter, the N, I want you to think about N as notice. Pay attention. This is where we would look at mindfulness. Mindfulness is really the art of paying attention to paying attention. Thinking about it, right? It is the idea that I should pause and consider my options before I step forward. Mindfulness says that I should evaluate whether or not I'm hungry and what I'm really interested in eating before I start eating. Mindfulness says that I should stop and consider where I'm at before I respond and react. Mindfulness says that I should consider what the other person may be experiencing before I reply, because I may be able to recognize that they're in a different spot right now and I need to give a little grace. Mindfulness says that I need to be aware of what I'm doing when I'm doing it. It helps us manage our emotions and our responses and our behaviors. Mindfulness is so very important. Some pieces of mindfulness, besides the behaviors, really need to be also about how we think about ourselves and how we think about our thinking. Many of us have that negative inner critic. Mindfulness says, let's pay attention to the words we say to ourselves so that when we do that horrible self-bashing, we can stop and say, those are not true statements. That is not accurate. So we've looked at curiosity about who we are. We've looked at our habits. We've looked at our attitude. We've looked at noticing mindfulness. But I want us to also look at our goals. Looking forward to our long-term goals, whether that is establishing a better relationship, or perhaps changing some physical habits and practices in our lives, or maybe it is a career goal, right? Regardless of what those goals are, when we break them down, a very simple way of approaching it is, what does tomorrow need from me today? See, if my goal tomorrow needs me to behave in a specific way today in order for that to come to fruition, that helps reinforce that change principle in my life. So when I was sitting back trying to figure out how to live a healthier lifestyle, one of the things I kept reminding myself of was that at the end, I wanted to be someone who could, and I filled in the blank, right? I wanted to be someone who could run and jump and play. And I wanted to be someone who could go on vacation with family and friends and be active and go on those excursions and hikes and walks and do the things that I wanted to do. I wanted to be able to fit into a plane seat and roller coaster. Those were all pieces of that future my experience. So that helped reinforce for me when it came down to the day by day, What do I need to do today to make sure that long-term goal gets met? Sometimes they're very small things. I really did focus on just the next day or the next 2 or 3 days because that's all I could see because that long-term goal was so far off. But figuring out those goals, and if you're not familiar, you can look at the SMART goal framework, SMART, making sure that your goals are attainable and actually actionable. Look that up if you don't know. But that idea is also we're building these walls brick by brick by brick. And the first 10 bricks don't look very impressive, but after a while they do. And it's remembering that those very small, accomplishable tasks do go together. And over time, we get the compounding effect of that. And our last of those six, and the word change, is E. And E stands for, I honestly, I'll be very honest with you, I vacillate. Sometimes I say it's encouragement, and other times I call it endurance, because I think regardless, there is this dedication to it. It helps if you've got encouragers along the way. It helps if you can encourage yourself. Sometimes it's taming the inner critic, treating yourself as if you are a compassionate friend to encourage yourself along. Sometimes it's getting a group of people that can cheer you on as well. And for a lot of times, it is that endurance. It is the sticking with it, even when it's tough, because all of those things work together. We need to find a crew that can support us. We need to find a way of making sure that we can make this change sustainable. Because I found that the more I understood myself, that C for being curious, the more I was able to tap into what was going to work in my life. I am naturally a morning person, so it made complete sense that I was going to do best making hard choices and difficult decisions very early in the day. I do really well when I can plan all of my meals before I ever have breakfast. Because if I make the choice then, I make really good choices. If I wait until I'm hungry at 6:30 and I'm frazzled after a very, very long day, I do not make good choices. And I know that. So understanding myself, having been curious enough to figure that out, means I set myself up for success. That H is for habits. Creating systems in my life so that it was easier to move forward is very helpful. I got to a point where I slept in the clothes that I needed to wear to the gym, so that when I got up, I had very, very little that I needed to take care of, shoes, car keys, that kind of a thing, because that I needed to remove as many barriers as possible for me at that time in my life. It's keeping the journal on the kitchen table so that I remember to write every day. It's keeping a pair of shoes in the car so when I have an opportunity to take a walk, that barrier of having on the wrong shoes is not there. It's the reason why a lot of people will carry their workout clothes in their trunk with them so that on the way home, they don't have the excuse to not stop. It's why we meal plan. It's why we keep a book by the bedside table. All of those are systems we set in place to encourage us to continue the things we want to do. That's why couples often have scheduled date nights, those habits that create long-term success. The A in change reminds you of your attitude. It's quieting that inner critic. It's being grateful. It's being positive, trying not to be that negative voice in your head that says it's not going to work. And the N comes back to noticing and mindfulness, pausing before you react. If this is something that piques your interest, I have another free session on Find Five, and that also will give you clear steps, clear questions to ask that will help you develop that mindfulness pause that does not require 20 minutes of meditation or deep yoga poses and breathing and all of this. They're valuable. Don't get me wrong. They're very valuable. But in the moment, Sometimes having 5 quick questions is very, very helpful. Our G in change was for goals. I'll be very honest with you. My goals nowadays tend to be very small. I think it's very important if we're setting those big, huge goals that we have smaller goals to reach along the way. It was also really important for me to develop some non-scale victory goals. So when you're losing weight, paying attention to the size of the scale is really dangerous, as you can imagine, because our weights do fluctuate. And when we put on muscle, we sometimes don't see the changes. Having non-scale victories are ways of marking progress that may or may not necessarily be important to anybody else, but they tend to be important to us. So for those who are trying to read more, write more, develop better relationships, pursue career goals, coming up with mini goals, coming up with things that others might not notice, but they would be significant to you, are really helpful for measuring that progress and getting the ongoing encouragement that helps keep momentum and motivation high. E is for encouragement. We all need it. All of us benefit from having others with us. I read a very fascinating study recently that said that they took college students and put a backpack on their back and told them they were going to hike up a hill. And they asked them to evaluate the steepness of the hill and the degree of difficulty, how long it would take them, etc. And they found over and over and over again, with a lot of different variables changed, that if the person was standing with someone they knew, they marked the hill and the task as easier. If it was someone they were very close to, it was even easier still. Guys, having someone walk alongside you makes all the difference. That's why joining communities can be so empowering when you're trying to make shifts. That's why so many different health organizations provide that. It's why including your best friend, your partner, your coworker, your neighbor, your dog, whoever and however it works, makes it better and easier. Because if you have someone else looking at the task, looking at the hill with you, it seems more tolerable. It's easier. So you decide you want to go for a marathon, find a training buddy. It makes it feel and seem easier, even if it's just for a short time. Find that crew that's going to support you, because it really does make a difference, I promise. There are other options, other sessions I provide, whether it's the Find Five method or 3 techniques that help get you out of that diet mindset that is so incredibly toxic. Maybe you're looking for something more in depth. I have an entire course on how to adopt a healthier lifestyle without dieting, without killing it at the gym every single day, without the restrictions, allowing you real food to live your real life. Really, that's available as well. So check it out on the website and give yourself some other tools, some other ways of support, because I think it's very, very valuable if we can lock arms and walk together. And I'm trying to provide those options for you. Thank you so much for being a part of this. Have a great day, and we'll see you next time.